Have you ever wondered why Singaporeans always curi fill up their petrol in JB? So much so that our Malaysian government had to intervene to stop them from pumping RON 95 fuel. What if I told you that in Singapore, RON 95 costs about 3 Sing dollar per litre, and that's roughly 10 ringgit or almost 5 times our ones in Malaysia? And that is all thanks to our Malaysian government subsidies. But hold on for a second, what if our government decides to cut these subsidies? Are they even necessary for our economy, or are they just one of the many tools to win votes? Stick around until the end of this video to find out for yourself. Let's start with the bigger picture. Why do subsidies even exist in the first place? Well, you see, subsidies are actually a crucial component to help develop our economy and aiding the B40 or less fortunate groups to improve their overall quality of life. And in times of high inflation or high global commodity prices, to be specific, high oil prices like right now, subsidies on basic necessities like rice, sugar and cooking oil may not seem a lot, but since they are the foundation for a lot of products in our daily lives, they can actually help in stabilizing the prices for most essential goods, which in turn protect us against sudden price surges and also inflationary pressures like the one we are facing right now, no thanks to the free money printing during the COVID pandemic back in 2020 to 2022. And Malaysia is actually one of the countries that has really generous fuel subsidies. If you look at it in relation to the size of our country, we can easily top the charts. And did you know that Malaysia is also the second largest oil producer in Southeast Asia and also the world's 5th largest exporter of liquefied natural gas? So needless to say, the oil and gas industry is one of the main contributors to Malaysia's GDP. To be exact, more than 20% of our annual GDP, and that's a heck lot of money coming from one single sector, and that's why we can fund the subsidies much easier as compared to other non-oil producing countries. So with greater revenue comes great responsibility, right? In 2022, the Malaysian government spent 62 billion ringgit on subsidies, and that greatly exceeded the allocation in 2021 by 4.73 times. And as you might have guessed, a significant portion, 45 billion ringgit, was allocated for fuel subsidy alone, no thanks to the inflation of the global oil price. Our government also spent around 4 billion ringgit for the electricity subsidy and about 2.5 billion ringgit for cooking oil and food aid, i.e. your sugar, rice and chicken price control. And remember your frito during Hari Raya, Chinese New Year, Deepavali and also Christmas? All of that comes with a cost of 861 million ringgit as well. And it was reported that Malaysia has spent a total of 80 billion ringgit for subsidies in 2023. And that's a 30% increase from the 2022 amount, no thanks to, again, the global fuel prices. Look at that, fuel alone takes up more than 60% of the total subsidy. So I guess it's pretty obvious to you now where our subsidy is mainly targeted at fuel. In fact, do you know that our neighbours in Thailand are paying about 40.96 baht for their RON 95 petrol as of the making of this video, which is roughly 5 ringgit per litre or more than double of what Malaysians are paying. And this is because Thailand's petrol prices closely follow the market prices, while in Malaysia over here, our RON 95 price at 2 ringgit 5 cents per litre are heavily subsidized. And did I forget to mention to you that RON 95 petrol is actually classified as one of the premium petrols besides RON 97 in other countries. You see how lucky we are getting premium petrol at cheap prices. So now it is clear that without the subsidy, I guess with the fuel cost alone, we will feel the pain in our daily lives. And the subsidy does improve the daily lives of us as Malaysians, especially for the lower income families, as the food, fuel and also utility costs are much more affordable to them. And on top of that, subsidies also stimulate economic growth by reducing production costs for farmers, manufacturers, suppliers and businesses, and that will result in lower final prices for us as consumers, which will again have positive chain effect to encourage more business expansion and also more job creation. Ultimately, it's a huge win for the Rakyat. But then that begs the question, what about our government? Surely the money has to come from somewhere, or someone has to fork out that, right? As I've mentioned earlier, our government has spent a lot of money on fuel subsidies, and it's on an ever increasing trend. So to fund these subsidies, our Malaysian government has to use a lot of public money, i.e. the money primarily from taxpayers, which affects other areas where the money could be spent instead. And if not handled wisely, this will lead to more government debt, also known as a fiscal deficit, when government spending surpasses their tax revenue. And a growing fiscal deficit could in turn lead to our government borrowing more and more money, potentially weakening the Malaysian ringgit, making our imports much more expensive, and resulting in price inflation for most of the items in our daily lives.
Sekarang Malaysia memang jatuh, habis mesti naik lah. Barang-barang kalau import mesti naik sikit lah.
I mean, you all can relate to that, right? So what happened in 2022 was this situation contributed to a large budget shortfall at around 99.5 billion ringgit, which is equivalent to 5.6% of our annual GDP back then. And that shortfall resulted in an almost 92% increase from the 2019 pre-COVID 52 billion ringgit deficit. And if subsidies are not controlled in terms of their allocation, it might also have a ripple effect towards the growth of vital sectors in the country, such as your public infrastructure and also services. It's very simple logic. With everyone able to drive affordably, the demand for public transport will decline as well. So ask yourself, if you can afford a car, would you prefer driving to work or use the LRT instead? Well, there you go. You answered it yourself. So as we can see, the increasing subsidies within the country are unsustainable, and in October last year, our PMX Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim introduced Subsidy Rationalisation during Budget 2024, in which targeted subsidies for fuel and electricity will be implemented, and price controls for egg and chicken to be removed to reduce the cost of subsidies to the country.
Experts say the government needs to move forward with targeted subsidy reforms that are designed to save billions of dollars a year.
Low prices for chickens and eggs prompted the government to lift price controls for the two staple items to ensure sufficient supply.
Half of fuel subsidies are said to benefit the rich.
If this can be stopped, the amount of subsidy which can be saved will amount to billions.
The targeted mechanism can work because out of the 38 billion of subsidy for petrol, most of it, half of it actually goes to those who can afford it.
But wait a minute, before we jump ahead of ourselves, I'm sure some of you are scratching your head and asking, what the heck is a targeted subsidy and how much good can it do? Well, let's break it down. Unlike a broad-based subsidy that applies to everyone, like our current beloved fuel subsidy, a targeted subsidy provides financial support specifically to certain groups who need it the most, like low-income families, farmers, or those buying essential goods just to survive another day. This strategy ensures that the subsidies are not only more effective, but also more efficient, as it helps to get the right aid to reach the right people, while also reducing the strain on our government's budget.
The biggest problem with petrol subsidy is the biggest chunk of it is going to the T20 group. That's the biggest problem.
This way, we can focus our resources where they are needed the most, making every dollar or ringgit count in this case. Of course, that's a fancy way of repackaging a subsidy cost cutting lah. Let's not beat around the bush with that. Still unclear? Never mind, let's take a look at this example. Currently, our fuel subsidy is on a broad-based scheme as mentioned earlier, which means everyone, all the Rakyats, can enjoy the subsidy regardless of whether you are rich or you are poor. So take a look at these two drivers. Aming, who drives a humble Proton Saga, and James, who drives a fantastic BMW X5. Aming goes to the petrol station and fills 20 litres of RON 95 at 2 ringgit 5 cents per litre, 4 times a week, so in a month he pays about 164 ringgit. Meanwhile, James fills 50 litres of RON 95 at 2 ringgit 5 cents per litre, same, 4 times a week. and he pays 410 ringgit per month for his petrol. And according to Deputy Prime Minister Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, the price of unsubsidized RON 85 would be 3 ringgit 5 cents per litre. So in this case, Aming technically only received 80 ringgit in subsidy, while James gets 200 ringgit in subsidy. You see the problem over there? And the same goes for our electricity consumption. According to reports, 10% of Malaysian consumers with the highest electricity consumption enjoyed 50% of the subsidy, while 50% of the consumers with lowest electricity consumption enjoy only 10% of the subsidies provided. And with this, we can see that those who are more well off technically got a better deal for their money. So back to what PMX introduced, let's talk about the impact of subsidy rationalisation. Firstly, for the public, the biggest concern is of course none other than the increase in the cost of living due to higher prices. Imagine filling up your petrol tank or cooking a meal for your family suddenly becomes significantly more expensive overnight.
Sebelum ni nasi putih kita boleh dapat RM1 atau RM1.50. Sekarang kita paksa naikkan satu bungkus dia RM2. Ada setengah pelanggan yang merungut sebab tak ada kenaikan gaji kan?
And indeed, we have seen how the price of food has increased and how the food serving size has actually become much smaller now. According to a research report, the B40 households spend relatively more on food at about 35% of monthly consumption as compared to M40 group at 30% and T20 at 23%. So some of the low-income households will face greater difficulty sustaining their life, leaving them more vulnerable to cost of living pressure. Not to mention the almost stagnant salary growth, especially in that lower income segment. While for our government, the consequences of eliminating subsidies will reduce the nation's financial burden, allowing better allocation of funds to other sectors such as development, healthcare, infrastructure improvement, etc. etc. And all of that will help improve the sustainability of the public finances, which is always a good thing for the country over the long run. For example, by removing the price ceiling on eggs and chickens, our government is expected to save about 3.8 billion ringgit. Meanwhile, adopting a targeted approach to electricity and fuel consumption could save an additional 4.6 billion ringgit and between 9.8 billion to 12.2 billion respectively, according to research. So, with a portion of these savings, our government has announced plans to increase the existing Rama cash contribution handouts for the B40 group, which aims to help reduce the wealth disparity. But of course, as to how effective these handouts are, I guess you would have known better as a Rakyat. Why don't you comment down below what you think about this? Anyways, at the moment, we are still unsure on how the government is going to carry out the targeted subsidy or the subsidy rationalisation.
So when will be the right time?
I think the right time will be when the economy shows a sustained growth momentum, right? Because I'm optimistic first and second, third quarter is strong, but fourth quarter, it's still too early to say.
So the question of whether it is useful to help the Rakyat in the future is still, dare I say, pretty much unknown. But regardless, a subsidy cut is not necessarily something new. In fact, over the last 10 years, we can see that our Malaysian government has been on and off cutting subsidies like sugar, fuel, electricity, and also cooking oil. Let's take the 2014 fuel subsidy cut as a case study. Through the reform, a total of 4.6 billion ringgit was allocated to the BRIM program, which benefited 7.3 million recipients in 2016, and that increased the purchasing power of the B40 group, and the proportion of low-income households earning below 3,000 ringgit has dropped as a result. Poverty also went down from 3.8% in 2009 to just 0.6% in 2014, and the expenditure on subsidies has gone down over the years from 43 billion ringgit in 2013 to 24 billion ringgit in 2016. So as you can see here, the subsidy reform is not necessarily a bad thing, if done correctly, of course. And I believe that as long as our government communicates and educates the public about the purpose and also the impact of the reforms during the reformation process itself, and they remain transparent about how the safe funds will be utilized to benefit us, the Malaysians people. It will help boost the economy and also benefit all of us Rakyats. But wait a minute, if you're looking to grow your wealth in the largest and fastest growing economy in the world, the United States, then look no further. Interactive Brokers is the perfect app for you to do just that. They are very well regulated in 10 different major countries, including in Singapore. They come with a super low fee package and they even offer fractional shares trading. So you can technically start investing even with just a few hundred ringgit. I personally have been using their investing platform for years and years already, and I could not recommend them enough. Feel free to use my link down below to open an account for yourself. It's free, fast, easy and secure, so go check it out. Alright, rounding up today's video, yes, the subsidy cut will bring short-term pain to us, especially to most of you watching this video that are most likely from the M40 or T20 group. I feel you, bro. But think of this as a short-term pain for long-term gains. If this is implemented properly, once the poor can stand on their own feet and the cost of living is reduced, more people will be able to spend. Then our government will be able to use the extra money to focus on the M40 and T20 groups instead. I mean, I'm idealistic, but hey, one can only dream. Of course, the reality is it's easier said than done. We wouldn't be in such economic condition now if not because of the decades and decades of let's just call it lackluster policies and you know lah. Comment down below, was this video helpful? What are your thoughts on Malaysia's subsidy reforms? Or what should the Malaysian government focus on in their upcoming policies? Remember, make your voice heard, and I'll see you in the comment section down below.